Hello, world and universe. Welcome to the Trevor Donald Experience. Manifest your truth. And if you're new to the channel, please hit that like and subscribe button. And for all my continued followers, I want to say thank you. And this is an opinion-based video channel where I try to open your eyes and ears up to some of the travails and tribulations that take place throughout our cities, our states, our country, and sometimes around the world. And this story, again, is about the state of Alabama. But as a precursor, I want to remind everyone that it is very important through this national election year that you pay attention to your city and your state politics. Know who your lieutenant governor is. Know who is in your state senate. Know who is the president of the board of aldermen and your alderpersons. Know who your governor is and how he or she is legislating laws on the books. Know your state Supreme Court. Know many of the things that are taking place right there at your doorstep in your city, because these laws can affect you each and every day, way more than these federal laws. And the state of Alabama is a prime example of what I'm talking about with draconian and archaic laws that are on the books and how it is affecting the citizenry of the state of Alabama. And when you listen to this story, it would make you wonder, man, would I ever want to go to Alabama? And what is happening with the Alabama prison system and its association with some of these corporate fast food companies, and how just when we thought slavery has been abolished, it seems like there is a new form of slavery with incarcerated inmates and working at some of these big blue fast food companies. And after you hear this story, you may want to stop going to some of these fast food places if you can, and put maybe a ban on it, because these companies are profiting at high margins based on cheap labor of incarcerated inmates. Companies like Wendy's, McDonald's, Burger King, Kentucky Fried Chicken. Please listen to this story, share and like it. This is a case of enlightenment. And just when you have time to watch reality TV or other shows on TV, man, please push that button and understand and read about your state constitution, how your governor is legislating, how your mayor is legislating, how your county and city prosecutors are legislating laws, because they can affect not only you, but your children and your other family members. Just when you think you are above reproach, it may not happen to you, but it could happen to somebody very close to you. And this story about Alabama and its association with some of these fast food places and how they're treating incarcerated inmates that are working at these places on a furlough, but still are in prison, and they are taking all the money. This sounds like modern day slavery to me. So let's go. Alabama, the state of Alabama, generates billions by trapping people in prison for cheap slave labor. I didn't believe this story when I first saw it. Alabama's Department of Corrections, ADOC, is farming out prisoners to work at hundreds of companies, including McDonald's and Wendy's burger joints. The state takes 40% of the wages and often denies parole to keep people as cheap labor. So they're denying many people parole so they can keep them in prison for cheap labor. Now, according to court documents filed this week in a class action lawsuit, McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Burger King, and Wendy's face a lawsuit challenging an Alabama prison labor system as a form of coerced labor and convict leasing. A federal class action lawsuit that was filed recently challenges a modern day form of slavery in the Alabama prison system that traps Black Alabamans in a forced labor scheme and generates for a whopping $450 million in annual benefits for the state. The suit seeks to dismantle the forced labor scheme and compensate current and former incarcerated individual Alabamans for the profits their work has powered. The lawsuit filed in federal district court in the Middle District of Alabama by 10 current and former incarcerated Alabamans, Union of Southern Service Workers, as USSW, Retail, Wholesale and Department Store Union, Mid-South Council, and the Woods Foundation, compares the current forced labor scheme to the extremely profitable system of convict leasing that powered Alabama's economy in the decades following the Civil War. By 1898, Alabama's convict leasing system accounted for around 70% of the state budget. 70% of the state budget. So it makes you wonder why there is a high arrest situation and a high conviction rate in many of these states. If their budget, this is prison by profit, not about rehabilitation. Of course, we know that does not take place. Many prisoners that go to prison, they come out worse than when they went in. And it also says that more than a century later, the lawsuit alleges the Alabama Department of Corrections, ADOC, has resurrected the 19th century convict leasing system in violation of the U.S. Constitution. The Alabama Constitution, this is why I say that you not only have a United States federal constitution, you have a state constitution, and you should read it, and a litany of federal laws meant to prevent human trafficking and discrimination. In November 2022, Alabama voters, they voted to amend the state constitution to outlaw all forms of involuntary servitude. Yet the state's prison's profitable forced labor scheme continues. According to the lawsuit, filed by incarcerated workers and joined by several labor unions, the state of Alabama received a labor trafficking fee equivalent to 40% of the gross earnings paid by the private employers for the forced labor, creating a fiscal incentive for the state to maximize the number of workers subjected to forced labor. Despite a 2015 state law requiring the Alabama Bureau of Pardons and Parolees make evidence-based parole decisions, the lawsuit alleges that the state denies Black Alabamans parole at a 2-to-1 rate compared to white candidates in order to maintain its pool of workers. So this is completely counterintuitive for people to do their time and then get out at a reasonable time according to what was mandated in the courts and what they were convicted of. Being on parole, so if you get 10 years to life, the 10 years are not the important part, it's the life part. Because every time you go up from parole, it can be denied and your 10 years can turn into a life sentence, not based on your rehabilitation or being a good prisoner, but based that they want you to work for free. We already know that inmates that work inside the prisons get 40 cents a day, 30 cents a day. But now they're allowing these prisoners to furlough and go out, work at Wendy's and McDonald's, and then they're taking all of their money. 40% of their gross. So you got 40% of your gross. Then you're going to have the taxes, another 35%, state and federal, which is going to leave them with pennies on the dollar. Alabama has one of the country's highest rates of incarceration and disproportionately harms, traumatizes, and incarcerates Black people, according to the Alabama Appleseed Center for Law and Justice. This is not my opinion. This is coming from the Alabama Appleseed for Law and Justice. Incarcerated people are trapped in this labor trafficking scheme, says the lawsuit, which was obtained by the New York Times. Although they are trusted to perform work for the state, local governments, and a vast array of private employers, some of the same people who profit from their coerced labor have systematically shut down grants for parole. So this is going from slavery to incarcerated servitude. Make America great again. What in God's green earth is happening in the state of Alabama? We also know that there are several private prisons throughout our country, along with your state and federal prisons, privatizing prisons for profit, which is another way to increase the conviction rate, to increase the incarceration rate for private prisons for profit. And now you're seeing that your state prisons in the state of Alabama is encouraging incarceration and for people to stay in jail so that they can be forced into coerced convict leasing. How inhumane can that be? People make mistakes. People go to prison. They're supposed to serve their debt to society. But this is a classic case that they're not only serving their debt to society, they're serving their debt to the state prison system and to private corporate companies such as Wendy's, McDonald's, Burger King, and Kentucky Fried Chicken. How many debts is an individual supposed to pay for a mistake that he or she has made? Are there some people that need to be in prison forever? Absolutely. But for the most part, people have to pay attention and understand their laws. I'll say it again. If you have a sentence that says 15 years to life, pay attention to the to life part. That means you have to go before the parole board every few years and they can deny you parole. And that 10 or 15 years could turn into 35 years, not based on your performance as a good, honorable inmate, but could be based on we want you to spend the next 35 years doing cheap labor. We also know that the tag term slavery is not something that many people want to use and say out of their mouths anymore, like racism. Slavery and racism, and of course the N-word are three words that people try to stay away from. So supposedly slavery has been abolished, but now what we're seeing right up under our nose, and if it doesn't happen to you, it could happen to your son, your nephews, a good friend, somebody very close to you. They get caught up into the justice system, get convicted of a crime, whether they did it or not. And in some of these states, you could spend a lot of years getting denied parole that has nothing to do on your performance as a prisoner, but has everything to do with your performance working in the jail or outside of the jail for profit. This is inhumane, it's unconstitutional, and the state of Alabama needs to take a long look in the mirror. And so, for example, when I say you should know a little bit about who your politicians are and your legislators, let's mention a little bit about who is the governor, the overseer of the state prison systems, the governor of Alabama. And of course, her name is Kay Ivey. She was originally a conservative Southern Democrat. That's an oxymoron, Southern conservative Democrat. There's some dichotomy in that title in and of itself. Governor Ivey, and she worked her way through the political ranks, and the people of Alabama kept voting her in. Ivey became a member of the Republican Party in 2002. She left the Democrats. She was the 38th Alabama state treasurer from 2003 to 2011. So she's been involved in politics for over 20 years. And then she became the 30th lieutenant governor of Alabama from 2011 to 2017. This is Kay Ivey. She is the 54th governor of Alabama. She is only the second female governor, and she started her full term as governor 2018. She is also a graduate of Auburn University. So that shows you right here, how this young lady, you should look her up. Look at her legislation, look at how she's voting, and does it align with your values and your belief systems if you live in the state of Alabama? She was the state treasurer, she was the lieutenant governor, and she is now the governor. So she's been voted in by the citizens of Alabama in 3 separate positions at the highest level of the state legislature, rising all the way to the top as a state governor. And there are tons of problems that are going on in the Alabama state prisons that I've done previous videos on. People are dying, the inhumane conditions that are there, the denial of parole at an extremely high rate above the national average. There is a lot going on in Alabama. So for you all that live in Alabama, I don't know, you may want to think twice about it, or even visiting it from a tourism standpoint, because you can get into some kind of chasm just visiting the place. This does not make the state of Alabama look good in 2024. Also, there have been many instances of police brutality. There are all kinds of things that are taking place in Alabama. And the other measuring stick, say you're not from Alabama. One thing you could do to control and have power over this is not support these companies that are allowing this kind of convict leasing to take place. Stop going to McDonald's. Stop going to Kentucky Fried Chicken. Stop going to Burger King. Stop going to Wendy's, even if you live in other cities. If you want to have some kind of effect on this, along with writing the U.S. government, the federal government, and having this kind of thing looked at and to be stopped, you also can have a certain level of power and measuring stick by stop going to these companies that is supporting this kind of coerced labor and convict leasing. Tell me what you think. Just because it's happening in Alabama, that does not mean it cannot come knocking on the door in the state that you live in. Things that you turn a blind eye, I always say the unbelievable will become the believable, the unforeseen will become seen. So it can happen in your city and your state at any moment of any time. Tell me what you think about this situation in Alabama generating billions of dollars by trapping people in prison for cheap slave labor. This has been the Trevor Donald Experience. Manifest your truth in a positive, righteous, and God-fearing way.